All right, I think we can begin. So, welcome to the roundtable discussion conducted by Center for New Economic Studies with the Environment and Social Issues clusters. Today's discussion would be primarily based on the migration of the Rohingya community. Now, to begin with, Ruchika, how do you analyze the trends of migration of the Rohingya community in the contemporary epoch, especially through an ethnic lens? And what do you think are the possible geopolitical challenges that the community face? Ruchika, unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, so Rohingya community have been migrating because of the fear of prosecution from the longest time from Myanmar to other countries like Bangladesh and even India um, to escape Myanmar and to escape the persecution of mainly Muslim Rohingya community, right? And they're not willing to go back to their state given that they have no protection and even they lack their citizenship rights, right? And the geopolitical fact around here is that uh, given that Myanmar is also surrounded by India and China, China has been very unsupportive of any declaration that has been put forward to protect Myanmar, in the sense that they are more in favor of Myanmar than the Rohingya community itself. So any declaration or any peace declaration that has been put forward by UN and the meetings in UN has been disregarded by China and even India at times. And what sort of ends up happening is that Rohingya community is migrating at such a large scale that it is populating the pollution, the overpopulating the city in Bangladesh and India, right? And they are also at the verge of climate changes, right? Which sort of also complicates the situation. Yeah.
Most definitely. And also, I think there are a lot of geopolitical challenges also that they face, especially in the contemporary epoch. And as a refugee community itself, they face a lot of violence and discrimination, as well as human right abuses as well to a great extent. And I think there is something about them being the minority, the minor Muslim community as well. There is so much of lens that we can talk when it comes to ethnic cleansing as well. And yeah, I think we have Jendra as well. Jendra, can you turn on your camera? So yeah,
And could you please repeat the question? I'm very sorry.
yeah. So the first question is basically upon identifying the trends of migration of the Rohingya community and what are the ethnic challenges that they face, the possible geopolitical challenges that the community face, and what are the possible geopolitical challenges that the community face. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jantri, you can go with the first question, which basically tries to analyze the trends of the migration of the Rohingya communities in the contemporary epoch through an ethnic lens. And what are the possible geopolitical challenges that the community face?
Okay, I mean, this is a very loaded question because if you want to go into the Rohingya crisis, you have to first go through the history, and then the current developments are much more, complex as opposed to what happened, during the early 19th century when there was conflict between the Buddhist and the Rohingya community. But I mean, if you look at the contemporary uh, migration through the ethnic lens per se, I mean, firstly, those are kind of separate things. I mean, the migration is fueled because of their ethnic identity and the way they have been persecuted by the state itself. But their location itself, geographically, their location, the state of Myanmar has made it, sort of convenient for themselves to use their location as a way to promote their agenda, which connects to their ethnic identity being connected to the people of Bangladesh itself. Because now what we're seeing is after the 2017 events, what we're seeing is the refugees themselves. The state decided that they will deem them migrants from Bangladesh itself, even though they have been living in the Rakhine state for the centuries now. So the ethnicity lens or the ethnicity character or factor itself has been the undercurrent which has been used by the Myanmar state. But now there are very complex things happening because of the modern nature of geopolitics, because India is now involved, Bangladesh is involved, and the problem is that earlier the migration itself, it was putting pressure on the economies, and the countries themselves were figuring out their own identity. But now that India has its own agenda and Bangladesh had its own agenda, uh, and the rise of the right that we have seen, and right-wing populism that we've seen in India, it is impacting the way that the migration is happening, and it is connected to the ethnic lens which we have seen in the Rohingya conflict all throughout. Because since the majority of the migrants are Muslim, India has often refused them refuge, and not given them the same rights as well as same treatment as opposed to migrants which were from other ethnic communities, because of the current geopolitical standing of India itself. So, but at the same time, in Bangladesh, the migrants have been, included, but it's putting a lot of pressure on the economy, the state itself, and the people themselves, since the borders in that region are very porous in nature, anyways. So, the ethnic lens, if you ask, I mean, there are a lot of components, but the ethnic identity of the Rohingya people have been the sole provider for them to at least feel like they belong somewhere. But at the same time, it has been weaponized against them, especially in the current geopolitical arena, wherein different states have different perceptions of different communities, ethnic communities, ever since the securitization of Arab people and the Muslim communities. So this has been a very difficult and complex situation after the 2017 events. But yes, I mean, that's the sort of gist of it. It is kind of a complex question, but we'll unpack it as we go.
Thank you, Jayendra. Now, considering the migration crisis that we see today for the community, what are factors that might probably hinder their ability to mitigate this kind of vulnerability that they face, be it geopolitical challenges or ethnic conflict?
I mean, as we've discussed before, there are a lot of different things which are happening at the same time, and especially like this event or this process has been deemed one of the biggest, migrations or ethnic cleansing. You can also say a lot of the UN agencies have said that. So it's a very complex thing. So mitigating it, or the ability to help the migrants, or aid their vulnerability has been a very difficult thing. Even though India and Bangladesh both have, tried to accommodate them, despite their own personal or economic pressures, but the people themselves, they suffer simply because they have been denied by the state itself, state of Myanmar, the basic rights that any person is supposed to have, because they have removed any sort of power or representation that they had in the government itself. So they do not have the ability to demand separate rights for childcare, for healthcare, for any other thing which any person or any citizen is supposed to have. So they've not had that for a long time, and now they have constitutionally, or at least through a bureaucratic process, they've made sure that the Rohingya people are not able to have these kind of resources. So whenever something like this is happening, there will be a problem of lack of basic necessities, such as shelter is the first thing. A lot of the times, the temporary shelters which are built for the refugees, they are not even remotely as safe or as up to the mark as we'd hope. And there is a lack of adequate healthcare and education, employment opportunities, and different things which affect the daily lives of the people themselves. They have not been able to live a very normal life, as we'd hope, if somebody is putting giving people the refuge that they're needed. So, like, being a stateless population, I believe, is what has caused the hindrance to mitigate their vulnerability, since they are not recognized as such by their own state, as well as other states. This has put them in a very kind of a legal limbo, wherein they are denied any sort of basic rights, and any kind of violence, exploitation is not given as much attention, or as we'd hope, or we'd want the people to receive. So yeah, these are the things which are impacting the way we can help them, or the state has been trying to help them. Was audible? I was audible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Ruchika,
Yeah, well, I've mentioned it before as well, that how UN had stepped forward as well previously to help and even to find a middle way to resort to these problems. But not much have been found on the ground, and even humanitarian agencies have been trying to provide for this community in Bangladesh and other neighboring states. But again, it is to an extent that they can, of course, provide. And given that there are now other communities that are now at the verge of being stateless or without any citizenship rights, it puts a lot of pressure on the humanitarian agencies as well. So it had been a very rocky sort of road for the community to be living in an already overpopulated country, city, and then being refugees there. So yeah.
thank you. Now, as Jayanta has well already mentioned, there is a developing country, even India and Bangladesh jointly takes collective efforts in order to, would you say, accommodate the migrating community as well. So, since many of the Rohingya migrants sought refuge in India, let's just talk about a little bit of developments regarding the same, the stand that India has towards accommodating the refugee community. Gentry.
I mean, India has provided, you know, uh, at least the basic necessities which are present, or which are ought to be when a large influx of migrants are coming in from another country. But you know, India has also been criticized a lot because of the treatment of the refugees themselves. It is not simply, a bare act, a bare minimum act of, decency that you're doing. If you have a nation which is unstable in your neighborhood, geopolitically, that is a very dangerous situation. And India's treatment of the refugees has been influenced by its domestic politics a lot. So India has put up, basic shelters. They've put up camps. They've tried to provide aid, and there have been diplomatic ways to do it as well. But still, it has been criticized, because I think around 30,000 migrants came to India, if I'm correct, but I'll check that. But the support for those migrants have not been as adequate. I mean, even when it comes to migrants from Bangladesh, they have been denied a lot of facilities and basic rights. So, I mean, it is not a surprise, but it is still not at the level as it is supposed to be. India has provided food, medical supplies, and tried to accommodate them as much as it can. But judging by the nationalist sentiment in India right now, wherein the we are ought to look at ourselves first, or our own security, then the influx of migrants which are uh, quote unquote from different ethnic communities which are not that welcome in India, it becomes a very tricky situation for India to handle itself. So in that sense, India's humanitarian response has been a sort of a mixed bag. It is sort of colored by its strategic considerations, like in the like broader foreign policy agenda, which like it has been criticized, but you can't do anything about it simply because it has been the way India has been doing this, even when Bangladeshi migrants were coming in as well. But like this has also impacted India and Myanmar relations significantly as well. I mean, India has criticized Myanmar for the conflict because these tensions overflow into our nation's sovereignty as well as our neighbors as well. So it has been a sort of a complex mixed bag of reactions from India.
Right. Thank you, Jayendra. Ruchika, what are your thoughts about India's status now, or what would you like to add on?
Yeah, there's nothing more to add on, but I would say that well, the xenophobic sort of sentiments are, of course, there when it comes to India as well. So, and it given their precarious state and adjusting their population with given that India is the all of the largest carries the largest population, it has sort of brought in an extra pressure over India when it comes to accommodation, food, and facilities. And moreover, India have also sort of at times have sort of given a choice to go back to Myanmar, but given the risk of persecution have been happening in Myanmar, they would rather prefer staying in India without any citizenship rights than going to Myanmar, where their condition would be more vulnerable and at the verge of death. So it's better it's for the community to stay rather uh, at risk in the adjacent cities and seek refuge. But yeah, it has been a very complex situation altogether when it comes to Rohingya community, given that they're also minority here and in Myanmar.
Thank you, Ruchika. Now, to conclude, there's just one more question that I like to put forward is that as migrating communities kind of, move quite often, it is kind of a, not a threat per se, but still poses a challenge for the environment to a great extent as well. Now, it is also reported that the forced migration has also led towards clearing of forests to a great extent, especially of the Rohingya community as well. So, like, how would you build the nexus between the concept of climate change along with the migration of the community? Jendra.
I mean, firstly, I believe, there is, I mean, not a right way, but I believe there is a more uh, nuanced way to look at it, wherein we cannot simply, put both of them against each other, wherein migration and climate change or the environmental impact, they are directly uh, impacting each other. I believe, in the broader scheme of, climate events happening in that specific region, the migrants themselves are not impacting the environment as such, as much as they are being impacted by the broader climate change which has been happening in that region itself. There is and there will always be clearing of forest and utilization of resources, even exploitation to some extent when certain conflicts happen and a large influx of people move into another region. We even see it in our nation, when Delhi itself, when it started to evolve and the increase in population, the surrounding regions decreased in forest cover almost immediately. But we never blame the people themselves, for clearing up those forests. So I believe when like it is often I've seen that whenever we try to connect climate change or environmental destruction with refugee communities, a lot of the times this tangent is created wherein how are they impacting the environment. I believe it is much more important to see how they're coping with the changes within the environment which are happening, because uh, you know the, the people themselves, we always see that we always say that the most vulnerable are most impacted by climate change, and at that very moment those people are the even more vulnerable than the vulnerable people that we talk about in different regions. There are several types of hazards which are happening currently. They are stateless, they have no disaster management authority, they have no way of supporting themselves, even in even when they have aid and the aid barely comes in. So how are they able to cope from those impacts? So this is a very special kind of vulnerability, and I believe it should be a much pressing concern, not just for the people of Myanmar. I mean, they have little to no concern anyways, but it should be a concern for people or for the surrounding states themselves, wherein they are supposed to, or at least they should create a much better plan to not just curb the impact through the influx of migrants, but also to help the migrants cope with the impact of climate change as well.
Thank you, Jayendra. Just a quick note, we just have a few minutes left. Ruchika, any final thoughts about the nexus between climate change and the migrating community of Rohingya?
Y- yeah, so I think Bangladesh have been struggling with climate change itself, right? We because it is not fit for the country now that to for people to shift from say city to from villages to city. Their option has been to now the only option to escape them from climate change is if they uh, shift to other countries. The other shifting the trend has basically shifted from not their migration flow have been shifted from say village to city, so they don't have that option because the entire country has been affected by the climate change. So Rohingya community in this scenario sort of sort of at a very disadvantaged position, because given their position, given their state in the country, it has been difficult from them even to well, have a stay there, right? So for them, I don't think it sort of adds on to the problem of climate change, but we cannot really point fingers at who is really causing the climate change, right? So I would say it sort of adds on to the problem of climate change, and it sort of makes it more fragile as a country.
Thank you, Rachika. With that, we'll come to a conclusion for this discussion, and thanks a lot for your participation and contribution towards this discussion.
Thank you.